Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 10. It is hard to believe that we are 2/3 through this semester and we're in the home stretch. So let me share my screen here and talk a little bit about what is expected for week 10. As you know, this is the final week of our second writing unit. So this week's work is due on Sunday, March 27th. I'm not going to take a look at the weekly objectives because they're lengthy and repetitive, and you can look at them yourselves. So here's the context and to-do list. As I said before, we're in the last week of this second writing unit, which means that you are revising, proofreading, and will submit your final revised draft of Essay 2. But there are some other things that you have to work on this week as well. So of course, you're watching this weekly overview video, and I will be presenting a lecture in conjunction with this overview material. Then we have the week 10 resources folder. I'm going to open that up for you and just show you what's in there. There is a PDF of the writer's memo, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute because this is just a hard copy for you if you want to keep it for your files, but this is actually an optional extra credit journal assignment to get you thinking about your writing process and be reflective about the things that you've been writing. There's also, I'm going to change the order of these things. There's also a handout called Revising Paragraphs and Essays handout. I will open up that PDF, and this is actually from a workbook that we used to use in in-person classes. And it's a helpful tool for students. So I've actually just copied this chapter, and it's a workbook, but you don't have to work through it, but it does contain some good information. And I'm actually going to go through a couple of these examples when I do my lecture on revision and editing. So we look at revision both from a global and from sentence to sentence format. So this is just the handout that PowerPoint is based on. And if I go back to our resources folder, I also include the PowerPoint that I'm going to present to you in a moment. So that's the resources folder. Now I will take you to the writer's memo journal assignment. So as I say here, for this assignment, you're reflecting upon your process, your writing process during the Essay 2 unit. Some of you are still working on past assignments, so I'm not requiring you to reflect upon the final revision that you've done, but you can reflect upon any part of the Essay 2 unit. So you can choose to comment on your rough draft, if you've written your rough draft, your final revision, or some other aspect of Essay 2. So here's a list of questions that you may find helpful in guiding your writer's memo. And this is a little bit more geared towards the rough draft or the final revision, but at least it gives you some ideas about what sorts of things I would like you to reflect upon as far as your writing process is concerned. Keep in mind, you don't have to follow that question or answer format. For example, you could compose a letter to an intended reader, me, or you could approach the memo as a movie review or give yourself a grade and justify why you think you deserve that grade with examples from your writing. I am asking you to write a minimum of 2 paragraphs, and that's for those of you who have actually written the papers. If you want to talk about some other aspect of the Unit 2 assignments, then at least a paragraph addressing and reflecting upon that. And this is worth 2 extra credit points. So there's a list here of 8 questions, mainly asking what your thesis, claim, and purpose, who your audience is, what you did well in the essay, how you could improve, what part was easiest to write, which is most difficult. If there's a sentence or a paragraph that you think is really good, why do you think it's good? Or sentences that you might find least effective, why they might be least effective. And how did you go about writing the assignment? Did you write the paper all at once, or did it come together in pieces? And what would you like me to look for in your draft? what have you learned through writing this paper, and how have your feelings about the topic changed through writing? So as I said, these questions are more geared towards the actual essay themselves. But if you want to address something that you've struggled with in this unit or something that you thought was really cool, you can do that as well in this journal assignment. So these questions are just guiding you through some of the thought processes. I wanted to give you another opportunity to get some extra credit points. And I thought, oh, I'll do this writer's memo as kind of introducing students to reflective writing and reflecting upon their process of writing. So next in the list is the proofreading links. Again, this is a repeat from the first unit, and you'll see these links again in the third unit, but they have helpful tips on editing and proofreading, commas, fragments, and run-ons. If you see me and I make a comment in your draft that you have a fragment, sometimes I will provide a tip on how to fix that. Other times I'll just say it's a fragment, right? So sometimes you can go to a list of these things to see what problems you're dealing with and then learn more about them. So these are good resources to take a look at when you're revising and editing. And then lastly, we have the submission link. Submit, it should be at least 5 pages, roughly 1,250 words, use 5 sources. Try to keep it below 10. Most of you don't have a problem with that. I do have one student who used a lot of resources, but I've suggested ways to pare down that essay because it was actually longer than it needed to be. And make sure that your sources and citations are in MLA format. So let's take a look. Actually, we'll do this in a minute. I am going to now call up the PowerPoint and launch into the lecture here. So as you will see here, we have revising paragraphs and essays. Sometimes students are a bit overwhelmed when it comes to revision, or they think that revision is simply just fixing the little spelling or grammar or punctuation errors. But revision is a little bit more than that. It's a little bit more in depth, but it does involve some proofreading, and it involves some editing as well. So I thought I'd take a moment to launch into this. So here's an example from that handout that I talked about. And I'm actually going to jump ahead to the next slide because I want you to think about these things as I'm reading it out to you. What is the main argument? Is it clear to the reader where an essay with this kind of introduction is headed? And look for any other bigger or global issues that you see in the paragraph. So this is called Sports on TV, a win or a loss. So let's read through this and figure out what the thesis is, what the main idea of this introductory paragraph is. Okay. Team sports are a big part of American life, and they have a tendency to bring people together. They require that team members cooperate with one another to fulfill the game plan. They also create shared enthusiasm among fans. Thanks to HD TV and innovative camera work, this togetherness seems available to almost everyone, and we can all feel part of the game. Some fans get out of hand and take wins and losses too seriously, whether at the stadium or on their couch. We do not have to buy tickets or travel to a stadium to see the World Series or the Super Bowl. These games are on television. We can enjoy them from the comfort of our own living room. In the past 20 years, the percent of people who say they'd rather attend a game in person has dropped from 54% to 29%. It's more affordable and enjoyable. So, looking at this, we get the idea that by the title and by most of the sentences that this person writing here is that they are discussing how or maybe even arguing for the the use of television sports. Watching sports together can make you feel a part of the game. It's more affordable, it's more enjoyable, and you can enjoy them from the comfort of your own living room. So the thesis, if we're looking at this again, or the main argument would be something like, let's see. We do not, in the past 20 years, percent of people who say they'd rather attend a game in person has dropped. It's more affordable and enjoyable. So I would say the thesis probably is related to this, although it's not a very strong thesis. Watching sports on TV is more affordable and enjoyable. That's the main argument there. And is it clear to the reader where an essay with this introduction is headed? More or less. There are some sentences that don't really fit in or aren't relevant, and we'll address that in a moment. So there are some bigger global issues in this paragraph. I'm actually going to pull up my annotation tool here, and hopefully this will work. So if we see a few things here. Let's look at a sentence level. And if we look at things here, they require the team members cooperate with one another to fulfill the game plan. They also create shared enthusiasm among fans. So this is talking about team sports are a big part of American life. This sentence right here, the second sentence, I'm not keen on it. It could stay, but I'd probably suggest rewriting it. Thanks to HD TV and innovative camera work, this togetherness seems available to almost everyone, and we can feel a part of the game. So yeah, I would say, and get my pencil tool, maybe. I would say, where is draw? Oh, there we go. I would say get rid of this sentence right here, right? It's talking about the players. We don't really need to talk about players. And then this sentence here about HDTV makes everyone feel, it helps this togetherness seems available to almost everyone, and we can all feel a part of the game. So that kind of links with this idea of bringing people together. Some fans get out of hand and take wins and losses too seriously, whether at the stadium or on the couch. Again, I'd say this is not as relevant as it needs to be, so we could probably get rid of it and still be okay. We don't have to buy tickets or travel to a stadium to see the World Series or the Super Bowl. These games are on television. We can enjoy them from the comfort of our couch. And so, as I said, this is the thesis here, and I would have a note, add a note here saying to revise it so that it's stronger. So now let's take a look at some of the editing things. We have a problem here, right? Because that needs to be a capital A. It's proper noun, American life. If there's any punctuation problems, this togetherness, thanks to HDTV, that sentence is okay. We do not have to buy tickets or travel to a stadium to see the World Series or the Super Bowl. And this here is actually a comma splice. So I would actually suggest either using a semicolon here, because these are two independent clauses, or putting a period and then a capital T. These games are on television, and we can enjoy them from the comfort of our own living room. In the past 20 years, The percent of people who say they'd rather attend a game in person has dropped from 54% to 29%. And this is a citation, so that's fine. ITS, this is actually meaning the contraction of it is, so we need to put an apostrophe there. It's more affordable and enjoyable. Using the pronoun it here is a bit vague. As I said, for a thesis, I would ask this writer to revise so that it's really clear about what they are trying to say. So that's an example of how to go about a global revision, removing sentences that don't really need to be there and taking a look at clarifying the meaning. So let me clear all those and move on to the next slide. So in the handout, you'll read some tips for revising globally. Some pointers are to reread the assignment and to take a look at the rubric. So let me share our Blackboard page again, and we will actually take a look at the assignment rubric. If you click here, you'll take a look and it says view rubric here. You can also find the rubric if you go over to My Grades and look on the assignment. There should be a place that you can take a look at the rubric. I'm going to click on this and then I need to actually do a new share so you can see this pop up. I've learned and I'll expand it so that you can actually take a look at the rubric. I may have gone through this once before, but I think it helps to emphasize the different things, the different criteria that I'm evaluating you on when we do the final revision. So the first easy things that I'm going to check for are how complete it is, whether there's a works cited page, and whether your formatting is correct. So if you have round about 5 pages, which is around 1,250 words, estimate about 250 words per page, it comes out to be 5 pages, and check to see that you have 5 sources, you get 1 full point for that. If your formatting is all correct, that means you have a heading with your name and all the relevant information. You have a title for your essay. You have page numbers up in the right-hand corner, and your text is double spaced, and it looks like it's about 12-point font. Again, you're going to get another point for that. And then I jump to the end of the assignment to make sure that there's a separate works cited page. Remember, you should have your works cited page should start on a fresh page. And I make sure that it's complete and that it's formatted properly, or at least mostly properly. If it looks like it's in MLA format and it's not just a list of links, then you're pretty good there. So that's 3 points right off the bat, that if you do things correctly, if it's just formatted correctly and you have enough words or enough pages, and you do your formatting, you're really good. Then I look at the introduction. I read through the introduction, make sure that it's engaging, it avoids announcing things, and that you have a thesis statement somewhere in there. Again, you can have a pretty good introduction, and then the rest of your essay might be a little rocky, but if you have a good introduction, I'm going to give you a full point. Of course, I need to make sure that there's a thesis statement. Most of the times the thesis statement is contained in the introduction, but there are some writers who have a little bit more maturity in their writing approach, and they can get away with having a thesis statement buried in the next few paragraphs. But in general, I'm looking for a pretty focused thesis statement that's specific. It's taking a stand on the issue. I know what your topic is, and I know where you stand in your argument. And then I'll read through, hopefully you've done a rough draft, and I've already read through it. So I'm looking now to see if you've made the corrections that needed to be made, or you've made any significant revisions. So I'll make sure to take a look at how you are using your evidence, right? So I look at integrating your quotations and paraphrases into text. I will be looking for those parenthetical citations or quotation marks, that kind of thing. So I'll be looking for that. If you do that correctly, you're going to get a point. Again, related to that is supporting evidence. If your evidence is substantial and viable that you use throughout your paper. Now, if you've completed the thesis statement and annotated bibliography, I know that you're going to be using pretty substantial and viable evidence already. And if I've read through your rough draft and you've incorporated that evidence, then I know that you've done the job. So it's usually a pretty quick thing for me if you've done those other assignments. And then I make sure that your in-text references are used correctly, either through incorporating a signal phrase that mentions the author or mentions the publication, or using that parenthetical citation. So that has to do with using your paraphrases and quotations. And then I look for your counter argument. Somewhere in there, there should be a counter argument. And usually when you get to this final phase of your revision, you've already done the counter argument assignment. That's the previous assignment before you do your final revision. So I'll be looking for that counter argument and hopefully that you've included it in your revision. And then the very last thing, and this is really such a minor thing, if you are still struggling with syntax and grammar and mechanics, there'll be some points taken off for that, but usually I am pretty lenient. I will point things out, and if you're aware when you're doing your revisions, you will take my notes and take my feedback and put that, implement it in your revision and make sure that you are editing and proofreading. If you just send me a duplicate of your rough draft and you didn't make any kind of changes, I am going to ding you on this last point. But typically most students will go through and fix those little surface changes. So that's the rubric, 10 points. I will close that out and go back to the slideshow. So that is the rubric. Reread the assignment, make sure that you're doing what the assignment is requiring, and then take a look at the rubric and make sure that you're fulfilling all those various criteria. The next thing is to approach global revision in cycles. So you're not going to do it all at once, right? You're going to think about paragraphs, but you're also going to think about sentences, and it's kind of a cyclical thing. Lastly, you want to seek feedback from others, such as tutors from the Writing Center, me, your instructor, or other readers, whether that's a classmate or a family member or a friend. It's always good to have an extra set of eyes who can look at your writing, right? So of course, doing the rough draft, you get feedback from me, and it's usually pretty extensive feedback. I'll tell you where you're going wrong, where things are good, and typically for those rough drafts, if you've completed the assignment and it looks almost, you have sources and you've done a valiant effort, I'm going to give you full credit. If there are some things that are missing, I may take off half a point or something like that. So if you get a 5, it doesn't mean that your draft is perfect for your rough draft. And I know I've said this before, but always go in, take a look at my feedback, not just the feedback that I'm leaving in the comment section, but go back into the document itself, because I do make notes on the document. I have in-text notes, and I make little drawings just like I did on that slide. I make little drawings, circle things, correct punctuation, and that kind of thing. So it's always important to go back and look at that and not just base it off the rubric or off the comments that I leave in that comments area. So it's always good to get feedback and to implement that feedback, not just to get feedback and then ignore it, because otherwise what's the point of somebody taking a look at your draft, right? You want to improve. So part of that is implementing some of that feedback. Sometimes the feedback is really good, and other times it's like, you know what, I disagree with what this person says, and I'm going to leave it as it is. So yeah, that's feedback. So as I said, reread the assignment rubric. I showed you how to do that. It's a detailed description on the assignment submission page. And this image is from my course last spring, so you'll see that the dates are a little different, only slightly, I think by 1 day. And but you can also find the rubric in my grades under the assignment, as I told you. So what do I mean by approach global revision in cycles? Well, there are various things that you can do each time that you revise, right? You can sharpen your focus, you can improve the organization, you can strengthen the content, you can clarify your point of view, and you can engage the audience. You don't have to do all of these things at once. And sometimes, you know, not all of these things are necessary when you're going in to revise. Sometimes you just need to sharpen the focus of your thesis statement, right? Other times you may need to improve organization. You might need to move paragraphs around or sentences around. And if you're having a particularly difficult time with organization, I usually will go in and reconstruct a document for you and actually move paragraphs around, because it's easier to show you how to do that rather than explain in writing how to do that. So sometimes I will provide you with a mock-up document where I think things could be improved by moving sentences around or moving paragraphs around. Sometimes you need to strengthen the content. Maybe you're not implementing those sources as well as you could, right? And sometimes you need to clarify your point of view. Lastly, engaging the audience. Of course, that is done primarily at the very beginning. You want to grab your reader's attention. You want to make your introduction interesting. However, you're not off the hook as soon as you write a good introduction. If the rest of your essay is dull, you're going to lose your audience, right? So you need to maintain, not just engage, but maintain that engagement throughout the course of your essay. So remember, we're here to help you. As I said, seek that feedback from Writing Center tutors. They're available face-to-face if you happen to be on campus, but you can also schedule a virtual meeting with them. You can schedule a virtual meeting with me. I do need a little bit of advance notice. I do have my office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12 in the morning. However, I am available in the evenings, and if push comes to shove, I can be made available on the weekends if that is your only available time. I know many of you are working throughout the week and you're just trying to get things done on the weekend, and the weekend is the only time that you could actually meet with me. Just reach out to me and I'm happy to set about probably 30 minutes aside for a meeting. And again, of course, you always have friends and family who hopefully would be happy to read through your draft as well. So this second example, I'm actually going to skip over, but if you want to look through it, you can. So let's move on to revising sentences. I've talked about revising paragraphs, moving big chunks of text around, and that kind of thing. So here are some tips for revising your sentences. Again, think of strengthening, clarifying, varying, and using correct things. By strengthening sentences, you are going to use active verbs. You want to delete any extra words and choose the appropriate language depending on who your audience is, right? If you think about the rhetorical situation and you think about what your purpose is, that dictates the type of language that you are going to be writing with, right? As far as clarifying sentences, you want to think of things like parallel ideas. Make sure that there's no awkwardness and replace those vague pronouns. I'm a big one for writing in the margins, they who, he who, right? If you are writing he or she or they, and it's too far removed from what your your source is saying, then you need to rename the source. Use their name, right? Make it clear to your readers that this is what you're trying to say. Now, sentence variation is something that not many novice writers are aware of, and sentence variation can make writing more interesting, right? You don't want to have a text that's full of short, choppy sentences, nor do you want to read through something that is completely, a paragraph length sentence, right? That makes it difficult to read. So you want to combine those short, choppy sentences with long ones. You want to choose varied sentence patterns. Don't be one and don't be the other, right? A good combination of varied sentence patterns shows that you're maturing as a writer. And of course, correct things, right? Revise your sentences. You want to have correct sentences. You want to make sure that the subjects and verbs agree. You want to make sure that you don't have fragments and that you don't have run-ons. And if you aren't sure what a fragment or a run-on is, Google it. You have the internet at your disposal, right? You're taking an online class, so there's no excuse that, well, I don't have the internet. Obviously you do. Google it. It's okay to Google what is a sentence fragment. It's okay to Google what is a run-on. Chances are, if you Google it, you're going to come up with Purdue OWL, right? The online writing lab. Again, punctuations. If you're not sure when to use a comma, look it up, right? There was, once upon a time, we used to require students to purchase a text like this, which is a style manual, which would answer all your questions about all those nitty-gritty little grammar and punctuation and spelling things, all the rules of writing that can be so annoying. Sometimes they're annoying to me too, and I am constantly looking up, okay, do I use a comma in this situation, right? I don't have all of the rules memorized, so having resources like this, either a physical book or a website that you can go to, is super, super helpful in getting your sentences correct. So those are some tips for revising your sentences. So, nota bene, which means note well, take note. We have grammar checkers, we have spell checkers, and they are incredibly helpful tool, but they don't always catch each and every mistake. Remember, we have things like homophones there, and there, right? And the grammar checker or the spell checker isn't going to pick up on that if they don't know what your meaning is. So it's always important to double check, triple check sometimes. When in doubt, check Purdue OWL or check the style reference or run your quick question by one of the Writing Center tutors. Reach out to me if you're not sure, right? So yeah, it's always a good idea. You can use those grammar checkers and spell checkers, but it's always a good idea to take a look yourself and make sure that your meaning is as clear as it can be. Okay, so this example here, this is more of a sentence level revision. So let's look at some sentence level revisions that we could suggest for this example. Some of it is going to have to do with editing as well. So this is actually an example of somebody is writing about the lyrics of the song called Pumped Up Kicks, which was released, I don't know, probably over a decade ago. It seems recent to me, but you know, I am a bit of a dinosaur. So this writer is actually writing about the lyrics from that song. And they start out, the lyrics tell us about a boy, a kid whose, quote, daddy works a long day, end quote. He spends his day unsupervised. Robert is alone in his house and all by himself, and his free time is spent digging in his dad's closet trying to find cigarettes. There's not really a hint of any kind of a relationship, at least a positive relationship. The father comes home late and Robert is left waiting for a long time. Even if we can't relate to Robert, maybe we can understand his actions. Threatening gun violence in his school could possibly be the result of an unloving home. Robert is a sympathetic character. So this is an analysis of song lyrics, right? A pop song. And there's a few issues going on here. I'm sure some of you can pick out the sentence fragments and some of the other errors that are going on here. So the lyrics tell us about a boy, a kid whose daddy works a long day. Obviously, we need some kind of punctuation in the middle here, right? The lyrics tell us about a boy. Naturally, we have a pause. Let me pull up my annotation tool again. Naturally, we have a pause there. So we're going to place a comma. We don't need a full stop. We don't need a period there, right? And this phrase, a kid, is just clarifying about a boy. So we could put a comma after that. The other alternative is to say, we just want to get rid of this. There's no reason to quote a kid, right? So we could just strike that out totally. The lyrics tell us about a boy who's, quote, daddy works a long day. If you think a kid is more important than a boy, then you could keep it in, but it's a bit repetitive there. So I actually would say, get rid of that, right? He spends his day unsupervised. Robert is alone in his house and all by himself, and his free time is spent digging in his dad's closet trying to find cigarettes. You can tell by the way I read it that that is a run-on sentence. Why is it a run-on sentence? Well, let's take a look. He spends his day unsupervised. Robert is alone. Okay, that makes no sense, right? He spends his day unsupervised. Robert is alone in his house. Where should we end it? He spends his day unsupervised. Robert is alone in his house and all by himself. That's a bit repetitive, right? So I think keeping the name of Robert is important because this writer makes reference to Robert several times in this paragraph. He spends his day unsupervised. I put a period there. Robert is alone in his house. We can get rid of and all by himself. That's repetitive. And his free time is spent digging in his dad's closet trying to find cigarettes. There, we fixed it. We put in a period. Robert is alone in his house. That's, even, I'd leave it, even though unsupervised and alone in his house is still a bit repetitive, right? But it's okay. I let it slide. There's not really a hint of any kind of relationship. That's fine. But here, what's going on here? At least a positive relationship. That is a sentence fragment. And why is it a sentence fragment? Well, at least a positive relationship, what? There's no verb, right? To have a sentence, you need a subject and you need a verb, right? This is just a phrase, at least a positive relationship. So we speak like this, right? But it's not correct. I mean, we speak in fragments all the time. I'm doing it right now. But in writing, we have to convey things differently, right? Especially in academic writing. There's not really a hint of any kind of relationship, comma, small a, at least not a positive relationship. That says not. I'm trying to write with my mouse. At least not a positive relationship. Okay, so let's see what this writer continues with. The father comes home late, quoting from the song, and Robert is left waiting, quote, for a long time. That's fine, right? It explains the dynamics of this relationship. Even if we can't relate to Robert, Again, this is another fragment, right? Even if we can't relate to Robert, what? Ah, this continues. Maybe we can understand his actions. Even if we can't relate to Robert, comma, little m, maybe we can understand his actions. We're going to put a period here because then this goes into run-on territory, right? Suggest a capital T there. Threatening gun violence in his school could possibly be the result of an unloving home. Robert is a sympathetic character. So there you see the various sentence level revisions that we've made, right? We have removed some words, some phrases. We have put in and corrected some punctuation. We've added a word here and have changed things slightly. It's not a dramatic change, right? It's not like we've completely struck out sentences. We've just removed some words and phrases that don't really need to be there because they are repetitive, right? So you get the idea of sentence level revision and oh, I should get rid of all those drawings. There we go. So I think my last slide is just showing you where I actually got that handout from. It's called Revising Paragraphs and Essays, and it's from a student's companion to Hacker Handbooks. And that was done in 2019. So you hopefully get a bit of an idea about how to go about paragraph revision and how to go about sentence revision. So if you need any help regarding revision, please reach out to me, let me know, and we can arrange a time to meet and I can walk you through the various steps and what things need to be done. Okay, good luck with your revisions and hang in there. We are almost done. All right, bye-bye.